All right, welcome everyone.
And Sarah Bowerly-Gansman here as well. Hi, everyone.
All right, good evening. Next item on the agenda is reading of the minutes for May 23rd, 2022. Is there any questions or comments from commissioners? If not, I'll entertain a motion.
I have one little correction, and that's in resolution, I think it's number 5D, resolution 2232, and has it that I both moved to approve it and I seconded it, which I probably didn't. Either Randy or I probably did one or the other, but yeah. I couldn't have done both.
We'll probably have to, just for that one, we'll probably have to go back to the video and just correct that. So that might be that we'll just postpone the approval of these minutes till the next meeting so that we can figure that out and approve the correct thing.
Okay. All right, we'll move on to the next item of business, which is examination of claims for May 13th, 2022 for $11,755.18 and May 27th, 2022 for $356,035.13. Are there any questions or comments from the commissioners? If not, I'll entertain a motion.
Randy Cassidy, I'll make a motion to approve.
Deb Hutton, I'll second.
All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Anyone opposed? All right, thank you. Next item of business is examination of payroll registers for May 20th, 2022 for $34,420.80. Are there any comments or questions from the commissioners? If not, I'll entertain a motion.
Randy Cassidy, I'll make a motion to approve.
Deborah Meyerson, I'll second that.
All right, all those in favor?
Aye.
Anyone opposed? All right. Next item of business is a report of officers. Is there a director's report?
No report tonight, Madam President, unless the commissioners have questions.
Thank you. Legal report?
The only report I'll give is just a recap from the last meeting, just to be very clear. So tonight on the agenda you have before you, I think it's 2233 for the approval of the new Tif District in the allocation area. Just to note that that resolution at the last meeting failed on a vote of 2 for, 1 for, 1 against. I was mistaken at the beginning of the meeting, so just to be clear that it takes 3 members, a minimum of 3 members of the RDC to approve that resolution. However, that resolution could be renewed upon motion of any member of the RDC, and so that's what we'll be doing tonight if anyone feels so moved to make that motion and an appropriate second.
All right, thank you. Is there a treasurer's report?
No report. Happy to answer questions.
All right, any business development updates?
No updates this evening.
All right, then we're moving on to new business. Resolution 22-33. Who would like to continue to speak to us about this?
I'm happy to start off.
Okay.
Again, Rick Deeds, IT department. I guess I'm not quite sure how you would like to proceed. We covered a lot of ground in the previous meeting in terms of a presentation. I can revisit that for you, or we could entertain questions. However the commission members would like to proceed is fine.
Is there a preference?
I defer to you, President Kennedy, just because you didn't see the live presentation, although you may certainly have seen the recording, so if that would, but for me, I feel like I've seen the presentation from Mr. Deeds.
Anybody else have a preference?
Defer to you, Madam President, in regards to bringing you up to speed on things in regards to what we were previously discussed.
Well, and I hate to ask, but I would love to quickly run through the presentation if you don't mind.
Yeah, no problem. Get this going here. All right. Kind of orient myself maybe a little bit more to you on this. Welcome again. Happy to share this presentation with you. Just want to share a few things that have led to this point. As you know, broadband as it exists throughout the United States isn't at the level that that it should be, nor at the level that meets our goals. Some of the things that we have found within the framework of our efforts on digital equity is that we do see that inequities exist for low income groups, but also families with children, older residents. There is a gap that impacts low income students with low speed connections, and many residents only access the internet through their phones. Reliable high speed internet we know to be increasingly a work requirement, not just for remote work, but for a number of workers beyond that. The COVID-19 pandemic highlighted these gaps even more clearly than when we first began thinking about the need for this in 2016. And then the current provider subsidy programs don't attract the number of users that they should, and don't go far enough. And some of those are aspects that we address in this proposal. And there we go. So Meridium has requested, and the city supports, the creation of an allocation area to cover business personal property of Meridium as they install the fiber network and its infrastructure throughout the city. Meridium proposes to invest more than $50 million of its own funds in building the network, as well as establishing an office in Bloomington and hiring staff here. Taxes collected in the TIF would be rebated to Meridium by the city. This is desired to facilitate the build and achieve both the objectives of Meridium and the city in this project. Meridium is a public infrastructure developer, investor, and manager. They're based in France. Their U.S. headquarters is in New York City. They are also a mission-driven firm. They are a benefit corporation, as defined in France, with environmental, social, and corporate governance goals and adherence to UN Sustainable Development Goals as the element of their benefit corporation pledges that they achieve those goals in addition to the fiduciary responsibility of operating a business in a profitable fashion. They do focus as a business in areas of transportation, energy, transformation, and fiber networks, and we found them to be a uniquely good fit for Bloomington's fiber goals, our digital equity strategic plan goals, and our community values. So the city has long sought partners to ensure that Bloomington residents and businesses have ubiquitous, affordable, high-speed fiber connectivity. We want to secure the benefits of modern technology for all in our community. It extends to education, healthcare, jobs, entertainment, personal engagement in our community, and more. And regardless of income or their neighborhood, the place that they live within our community. We felt the need to bridge the digital divide and to address persistent digital equity gaps in our community, and to enhance Bloomington's overall competitiveness as a leading innovative community in our nation. We've had a number of goals throughout our efforts to secure this kind of infrastructure, and that's that the infrastructure be community-wide, with no parts of Bloomington left behind, that there is a community benefit that goes beyond simply the presence of internet connectivity, but that our community has an open, competitive, and fairly priced network, and we should have a say in how it's operated and how it works within our community. This network should be financially sustainable, should operate with a reliable business model, and it should work to bridge the digital divide, to address the real digital equity issues that we've identified in our community. So we've been at this for quite some time. We've been working really hard on this since the beginning of 2016, where we released an RFI, a request for information, that we whittled down from 21 to 12, 6, 4, 2 to 1 to ultimately select Axia as the partner we wished to negotiate. That went fairly well for quite some time until they were purchased by another company, and that company changed its direction in the target markets that it was looking at, and ultimately left Bloomington as well as a handful of other communities that it was negotiating with at the time behind. We've had conversations with a number of other parties, both within the RFI context and out. Metronet was one of those. We also negotiated with them, and again came close to an agreement until they pulled back. They also merged with another party with a different perspective on the market. We've continued to engage within the RFI process and outside with local incumbent providers, none of which have been actively pursuing a citywide fiber to the premise program, and certainly not an open access network with the types of digital equity commitments that we're considering today. Then COVID-19 arrived, and we learned firsthand the imperative of this kind of network being widely available, and not just to a select few, but to everyone. That it just illuminated the things that we were looking for in 2016. Unfortunately, we didn't reach our goals there in time for the pandemic, but it's given us additional energy to move forward, looking at these kind of partnerships again. In 2020, somewhat timely, we began the process of developing our digital equity plan. We conducted a survey, and by the end of that year, released that plan. We then began conversations with a company called Wired. They also looked quite promising, but were also purchased by another larger company, and pivoted as well in their target markets. But they had good business and collegial business relationships with a number of individuals on the Meridian team, and engaged in a friendly handoff of the information that Wired had gathered from their site visits, and work with us to help bootstrap our conversations with Meridian. Once we started talking with Meridian, we realized that we had the potential for a really compelling potential project, and a lot of areas of mutual agreement. We signed a letter of intent with them, simply indicating that we think things look positive, and we want to to enter into more detailed negotiations. And then we continue to work on all of these areas, the master agreement with Meridian, pursuing our digital equity initiative, and working to define a digital equity plan in the context of this project. We did an inventory of our conduit and fiber optic assets. We conducted a number of site visits with them until we get to this point, which is the announcement of the Meridian project and the pursuit of the Tif District that would allow it to happen. So, the Meridian project, in bullet points, they're proposing a gigabit speed plus fiber optic network. It is an open access network, which is one element that's very important to us. Meridian is not an ISP. They will partner with an ISP who will enter our marketplace, and after a time limited period with that new ISP, the network will be open to other ISPs who wish to utilize that infrastructure on a shared basis. That would include new market entrant ISPs. That would also include incumbent providers, potentially AT&T, Comcast, Smithville. They could all use this infrastructure if they wished to contract with Meridian for access to that infrastructure. Meridian's proposing to invest over $50 million in the construction of this infrastructure. That would also include creating new jobs within our community and establishing an office for its projects within Indiana. We expect full community coverage of 85% and greater. In general, we expect that to be higher to that, but that is the commitment that we expect from them. The cost of the ISP service will be competitive. They will be entering into our marketplace, with incumbent providers, and will need to price their services accordingly. And we have architected a robust digital equity initiative that I will describe right here. What we're proposing is 250 megabits up and down service to all income qualifying residents for this program. It will essentially come at a $0 cost, $30 a month for the service minus the $30 available through the Biden-Harris administration's Affordable Connectivity Program. The eligibility for this program will tie to existing benefit programs, including SNAP, TANF, the Indiana Department of Education's free and reduced meals, Social Security program benefits, and then we are working on HUD housing vouchers as a eligibility criteria, which is an exciting addition to this, which would allow us to include all of Section 8 housing that the Bloomington Housing Authority manages in its apartment complexes. And beyond that, we're proposing in this initiative that there be no connection fees to start up the service. This is a quote from one of our colleagues in this process. We've worked with CTC Technology and Energy for quite some time. Joanne Hovis has has been, a singular consulting asset to us along the way. And I'm not going to quote this, but I would say that if this program moves forward, it will be among the best digital equity programs in the country. There's some other elements beyond the digital equity program, and that's this. There's a guarantee that the ISP will adhere to network neutrality, which means that they will not throttle or control and discriminate on the basis of content that moves over the network, either from a commercial standpoint. This program protects the city's interest with a voice at the table. If this asset is ever transferred, we have insight into that and are able to review and approve that transfer. The regional impact of this project extends beyond Bloomington, although we're really talking about Bloomington and specifically talking about the TIF here in this meeting. This project is part of a broader initiative which includes the development of Meridian networks in Columbus, Shelbyville, and Martinsville. Those are smaller communities than we are, but we identified a very similar landscape in these communities. To Bloomington, Meridian was interested in expanding its investment, seeing an opportunity here, and so we were able to bring these communities along in this project. And then lastly, in the project elements, we intend for the build to start this year, with this process moving forward and conclude in 3 years or less. So the Tif District Request itself, this is the part of the public tax increment finance process that goes through Redevelopment Commission, Plan Commission, the EDC, and the City Council. Meridian is requested and the city supports creating an allocation area to cover the business personal property of Meridian as they install their fiber infrastructure throughout the city. Business personal property includes the conduit, fiber, optic cable, electronics, computer equipment, tools, etc. This kind of TIF, as we've discussed before, when applied to telecom infrastructure, is sometimes referred to as a spider TIF because it follows the path of the network through the community. And the total TIF value across 20 years is estimated at $14.4 million minus the administrative fees that the city will capture. This is the Tiff Boundary. It is essentially the city boundary, and then the proposed network path, again, which gives the name Spider Tiff, is presented here. This is a current, draft of the path, which is subject to change as the design proceeds. So why TIF for this project? It's necessary to support the project. It won't happen without it. There will be no increase to the public from this TIF. There's not a drop or decrease in funding for other taxing units because of this. But we also expect on the other side to see new revenue from employment, from other taxes being paid for property purchase and rental, etc. So why are we pursuing this through this path? Abatement is an option, but we thought this would be a public, transparent process. It involves multiple boards and commissions. It gives the city visibility into the tax amounts. We are a recipient of that, and then rebate it to Meridian. And it allows us to capture 5% for administrative costs. There are many other places in Indiana where business personal property tax Tif districts have been created in the last few years. West Lafayette, Wabash, Greendale, et cetera, et cetera. We would probably take several pages to go through all of these. This is just the last few years, which indicates this is a very common form of support. There's other places in Indiana where a TIF district specifically for telecom infrastructure has been created as well, and that includes Crawfordsville, Wabash, Lafayette, Franklin, Huntington, Lebanon, and Manchester. So not uncommon as well. So this project helps us meet some of our goals that I've articulated earlier, but some of those that have emerged out of our digital equity strategic planning process are important as well. This project will help us achieve or partially achieve some of those, which is to expand our digital equity fund, to establish digital equity navigators positions. In our current discussions with Meridian, they are proposing individuals dedicated to that effort, removes economic barriers in our community to adoption by providing essentially a first and world class class internet option for zero cost. It follows the recommendations in the strategic plan to work to recruit new competitive fiber broadband carriers, to consider public-private partnerships, which this is, although it is a public-private partnership that's very heavy on the private more so than the public, and to extend fiber to Bloomington Housing Authority, among other recommendations. So this proposal establishes a community gigabit fiber to the premise network with offering open access in a period of years. It's built by a unique partner, Meridian. It's a benefit corporation committed to sustainability and equity. It offers a groundbreaking digital equity program, 250 megabits per second up and down, no startup fees, 0 per month, applying the Affordable Connectivity Program subsidies, and we expect it to have a real impact on the digital divide in our community. There's no tax increase using the TIF, with negligible impact on other taxing units. This, in essence, if you take the ISP aspect out of this, we're essentially attracting a high-tech company that wants to locate in Bloomington, wants to build 50 million plus make 50 million plus in local investments, creating local jobs, establishing an office, and that's compelling even beyond the transformative services that they will be offering. So we thank you for your consideration of this project, and we are happy to entertain any questions that you have. A number of members of our team are here in this room, a number are here remotely, and would be happy to address your questions.
So I don't know if, and I'll open it up to any questions from the commissioners. I don't know if I'll be the only one with questions, but certainly feel free.
I do have one question. I appreciate the revised map that shows both aerial and underground infrastructure as planned. I was wondering if you could comment on, or if you've heard from Meridian, how they decided which areas to designate for underground versus which to designate for aerial, because I think I see a pattern that I'm just interested in how that was allocated.
I can share with you what I think that is, and then we may have some other thoughts on that. But it's essentially, when you look at the availability of poles is one area. So if there are if there's aerial poles, then that is an option. A number of areas in the community don't have that infrastructure. Aerially, it might be underground, so it's not an option there. And then there's also time to build considerations. So as we move forward with this, it can take a lesser amount of time to go underground versus to work through Duke through its process to get the rights to hang infrastructure on their poles. There's a number of different variables that lead one way or the other, and I'm not sure if anybody else would want to comment on that.
Yeah, this is Scott Lehman with Meridian. I just make the one clarification. As Rick pointed out, it's pole availability. Then there's the cost to construct underground, which is different in different parts of the city, depending on when it was constructed. And then we take a look at the nature of the underground construction and the disruption as we continue to move through the market. Sometimes it's much easier to use the aerial options, particularly in downtown districts, wherever it's available.
Aren't more utilities buried in downtown though?
There are a lot of utilities buried in our downtown, but there are also poles in the downtown as well. So that gives both options, and depending on the location, it might be more economical or more time sensitive to be able to go one way or the other.
Thank you.
Economics being withstanding, when we deal with our core downtown in regards to anything we can do to also accomplish the necessary speeds, but also to take into consideration the architectural and the quality of our already public infrastructure and what we have, because the downtown and our core area is the heart of our community. So we need to be cognizant of that as we say, well, we'll hang on a pole. Let's take that into consideration. I'm sure Meridian has looked at that, and it can't just be all about cost. It also has to be about quality of where we have our place. So,
yeah, we absolutely take that into account.
I'll just say my impression is that there's significantly more aerial and multifamily areas, and I'm wondering if that has any relationship to the considerations you've described.
No, it's not something that's taken into account. Ours is, it's a speed, aesthetics, and convenience, and cost.
Thank you.
Do you want to go ask some of your questions, Cindy? I have a couple,
Yeah.
but why don't you go ahead?
So a lot of my questions revolve around the financial sustainability aspect of the description. And I was wondering if anybody could speak to what due diligence has been done to support that this project is financially sustainable long-term.
Just a clarifying question, I assume you mean from Meridian's perspective?
Yeah, yeah.
I'm sorry, you cut out there just at the end of that question. Could you repeat it?
Sure. So financial sustainability is one of the keystones of this project. And I would just wonder if you could describe how you have determined that this project is financially sustainable long-term for Meridian.
Hi, everybody. Nick Phillips from Meridian. I don't know if you can hear or see me.
We can.
I hear you.
So to answer that question, we've obviously been doing a lot of development work over this for the past year plus. And the way Meridian structured this, there's a couple things that are taken into account, right? Obviously, the main driver is the cost element of building the network. That is the significant driver. So we've been working with our construction partners throughout, and we have fixed prices from them. So we have a very strong understanding of what it's going to cost us to build this network. We've also been working with both internal resources and outside consultants to develop a forecast of user subscribers and how they ramp up over time. So with that, we've taken that to our investment committee and signed off on the long-term plan. Now, for those of you who were there last week, we talked about Meridian's long-term view. So, I mean, this does, maybe have longer payback periods than others would look at. But that's what fits our investment profile. And then I guess the other thing we point out that in the event that our prognostications are completely wrong, that's a risk that is ultimately borne by Meridian, and there's no risk to the city. So ultimately, the network will always stay in place. And I think we touched upon this question briefly last week. The cost to operate the network once it's built is relatively small. So it would never make sense to not operate it once it's in the ground. So the network operation will continue no matter what. We would never rip it out. Ultimately, though, if it doesn't meet the projections, that's a risk that it's going to cost Meridian money.
So there's a $50 million investment and then about $14.4 million in TIF revenue over a 20-year period. How do you bridge the gap? Do you guys get paid from the ISP arrangement? And if you are, how do you quantify that?
Yeah, so we have an agreement with the ISP that we basically take a percentage of what they make. So, I mean, we are tied into their success and ultimately the future ISPs that are on the network. But that's the revenue stream that drives the project.
So what's your break even? How many subscribers do you need in order to break even or make the model successful?
I hate to do this, but given this is a public meeting and that's somewhat of a confidential trade secret, we don't really feel comfortable with sharing. If there's a confidential way of sharing that with the commission at some other point, we'd be happy to, but given there is press on the line.
Yeah, I think that's a question I'd like to know.
But ultimately, it doesn't have an effect on the finances of Bloomington if we don't build out the network to the level, or the TIF, the TIF reimbursement isn't there. I think, as your council will tell you, that's just money that we also lose.
Well, I think my questions, revolve around long-term sustainability and economic viability of the project. So that's kind of where my questions are coming from. Because if the project long-term isn't economically sustainable, then, we may have long-term negative implications.
I'd be happy to discuss those, at least at a conceptual basis. There's things you're concerned about in an open forum now, so I'm happy to go further into it. If there are certain long-term negative ramifications that are of concern to the commission, we'd be happy to discuss them. But I think, again, we point out the cost driver and the risk we're taking is all in the upfront. And once it's built, it's built. And it's a very, I won't say it's a de minimis cost to operate a network, but the break even to operate a network is in a very low single-digit range of take rate.
So I'll pivot my questions, and maybe this is a question for someone else, but how many residents in Bloomington would currently qualify for the $0 cost versus how many residents are there in total?
I think, and Scott, maybe you can correct me if I'm wrong, we have put it at roughly 18% of the population of Bloomington would fit under the program. I don't know if Scott or Rick has a more updated number. I might be speaking from out-of-date numbers.
Yeah, well, it was about right. We use just about 20% for Bloomington specifically out of the total population. And what we tag it to be is the market sizing is between the 35 and 38,000 units.
So how many customers that are paying the full amount would be needed in order to cover the 20% that are not?
It's not a coverage ratio as we take a look at it. It's our commitment to the market. So we don't have to have a certain amount on the paying side to cover the low income side.
So if it was all low income, then this model would be sustainable.
It would be positive. It would not be what we anticipated it being. So depending on your word, but yes, the project would be sustainable in terms of continuing operations. Yeah.
Who is the ISP partner, if you don't mind me asking?
Scott,
It's not under contract yet, so we would prefer not to put that in an open environment.
And how long of a period of exclusivity do you anticipate being a part of the contract?
Initial period would be 5 years.
Would there be any extension of that based on performance
Based on
metrics?
based on their performance, they would be eligible for a 6th year, and based on performance again, they would be eligible for a 7th year. And that would conclude the period of exclusivity.
So you said you had a fixed price contract. Are supply chain or inflationary considerations, do you think any of those will impact the project and overall cost?
as it stands, go ahead, Scott.
I was going to say there's certainly a risk, and that risk is entirely owned by Meridian and its contracted partners.
Can you also speak
at the
to...
current point,
Go ahead.
what's that?
No, go ahead, I'm sorry.
Oh, at the current, we do not see a risk to the overall cost or duration of the project.
Can you speak to other like collaborations that you guys have successfully partnered with in the U.S.?
Scott, you want to take that, or you want me to take that?
Yeah, I'll let you take it in terms of U.S. projects, obviously not fiber-based.
Yeah, I mean, in terms of fiber-based, our first project is in Canada, at least from our, how Meridian looks at we break up our market between Europe, Africa, and North America. So North America, first one's in the suburbs of Edmonton on exactly the same structure. And it's currently breaking ground right now. We've also done similar work in Germany and Austria, and are currently doing one in Romania. As it relates to doing these type of projects across other sectors, obviously Meridian has done this in large-scale transportation throughout the U.S. The current flagship one being the redevelopment of LaGuardia's Central Terminal right now, the refurbishment of the University of Iowa's campus energy system, a litany of train projects around the country, and a fair bit of toll roads as well. So I mean, there's Meridian itself has 17 assets in North America across various sectors under the same type of structure.
Can you speak to, in the presentation, we talked about competitive market rates. Can you speak to what the rates would be with the ISP partner that you anticipate and how they compare to the local providers or someone?
I mean, we would expect those rates to be, significantly similar to what is available in the marketplace. Obviously, if they're not, we would end up with revenue commitment issues, or revenue generation related issues. Our commitment to the city as it relates to pricing is to have a full-blown fiber-based broadband solution that operates the 250 to 250 at a net zero price.
Can you tell me how long Meridian's been in business?
Sure. We were founded in 2005.
And then where does the funding come from?
So for the North American investments, the majority of our investors are U.S. public pension funds and life insurance companies.
right, I think those are all my questions.
I'm Deb, and I have a couple of questions. One is, as I look at this revamped map, which I really appreciate, being able to see the aerial as well as the underground investment and infrastructure, I see in different neighborhoods, just by looking, that the, whether it be underground or aerial, that there in many neighborhoods there are what I would call sort of pieces of lengths of street or looks like cul-de-sacs that are not covered. And is that because it really will be covered, but it's hard to show it on a map of this scale? Or there are some cul-de-sacs especially, or curves in streets that just cannot be covered? So that's a question.
Yeah, cul-de-sacs, it would be more a factor of how to capture it on a small map.
Yeah.
Our intention is to target 100% of the market with a commitment to the city to make sure that we exceed 85%.
Okay, so even if I can't see one on there, it's likely it's going to go into that cul-de-sac here and there.
Yes,
okay.
Absolutely.
Thank you. And so the second question from that is that 85% goal. And that if you find, and I know in reading the proposal, that it's possible that some areas will be too expensive from your construction point of view to take fiber optics in there, either underground or above ground. Therefore, in some areas, if you find that you just cannot feasibly take either kind of infrastructure into it, can you provide some kind of permanent infrastructural hotspot so that kids, families, anyone, or businesses who are in that area still have some kind of access to the internet?
We could certainly explore that option with the city, as the areas are identified.
Yeah, that would be after you identify which areas. So.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. Right now we don't have those identified, but we can certainly take a look at how that type of network could be extended.
Because that would certainly could raise you from, if it was 85% or 89%, it could raise you, say, another 5%, just to make sure almost everyone was covered. So thank you.
Yes.
Those are my questions.
Yep.
And it may have been in the material someplace, but how many residents in Bloomington are currently not covered at all with any kind of internet?
That gets into the definition of access to the internet, because people can be at 25 by 3 as deemed to be connected to the internet by the FCC.
So do we know a number?
Well, when you take a look at that, it's probably, no, I don't have a specific number in front of me, so I'll refrain from putting one out there.
Excuse me.
Well, when we've looked at that before and what came in from our digital equity program, it indicates there are still a significant number of individuals that have no connectivity. Some of that's by choice, and some of that is not. They're simply not able to afford broadband, and so that's. Scott mentioned there's a number of variables. How do you define broadband? The federal government may define it as 25/3. We don't really think that that's adequate for our community. But there, we have an incumbent, cable provider which has infrastructure throughout the community. At one point in time, when the city could mandate full coverage through its negotiation of a cable franchise, we were able to do that. Now there's no obligations on any provider, whether it's for television services or for broadband, where we have the ability to enforce coverage. In fact, this agreement that we're working out with Meridian is the closest to that. They're willing to commit to at least 85% and more. other providers, again, either have that infrastructure in place because at one time we did require that, or they're not proposing to, to provide, fiber services, everywhere in the community, and nor are they proposing, an open access network or the kind of digital equity program that that we are, or a commitment to network neutrality.
The commitment we are making is to bring fiber to the homes of the residents and businesses in Bloomington. And with fiber, that is a forward-looking technology that will allow us to scale when you take a look at bandwidth speeds into the future. Whereas a large part of Bloomington is still served on technology that was deployed over the last 30 or 40 years.
So, quick question, and I think I heard a little bit of this, listened to the recordings, but so what happens if Meridian sells this opportunity, or what happens if Meridian goes out of business, period? Can someone walk me through that?
Rick, I can let you walk through the contractual language that's in there as to what it relates to the city's rights, because it's the city side. Which is like to point out, Meridian in its history has never sold a single asset, and we don't plan to anytime soon. Again, back to our point of who our investors are, they are long-term public pension plans and life insurance companies who are looking for long-term cash flows. They get very upset, or they would, if we sold something and returned them cash early, because that's not the reason they invest with Meridian. That's the reason they invest with their other investments. So we fit a bucket for them. So asset sales are very highly frowned upon in our world.
I'd say anybody that went through 2008 knows that everything can happen.
And we would also, while we agree, the world is an unknown, we also were the ones buying those things in 2008, not selling.
So to address another aspect of your question, right now what we are discussing is a provision that would indicate that there won't be a transfer within 10 years. And Scott can correct me if I'm wrong on that, but that's what we've been discussing. And then an element of review by the city in the event of there were a transfer. And I see Beth is here, and maybe she wants to chime in with the language in front of her.
Thanks very much, Rick. Beth Kay, Corporation Counsel for the city. Rick is right. What we are discussing with Meridian now is that there would be no transfer of the Bloomington network within the first 10 years from the effective date of the agreement. Other than there are some potential things that they may do with affiliates under their own control, but nothing that would change the control actually of the network. And then beyond that, if there were a transfer later on that altered that control, the city would have the right to review the prospective transferee and either approve or not approve.
And maybe if I could just add some color to the question about bankruptcy, because that's a fair question. How Meridian and all its assets are structured globally, they are all independent vehicles from one another. So Meridian itself functionally can't go bankrupt. There's no debt at our level. Every project is a standalone entity that survives on its own merits.
So would there be debt on this project?
Yes, there will be project finance debt on this project.
All right.
Okay. Quick
Any other
question.
questions? Go ahead.
But question, does Bloomington Housing Authority currently have internet provided to our low-income residents with fiber or not at BHA?
They have, residents have access to, our, to AT&T or Comcast.
Okay.
I'm not sure about the fiber aspect for AT&T.
But Meridian would be installing it into our central low-income area that we, on the Bloomington.
Yes, and one thing that we have talked about kind of gets to that 20%.
Mhm.
You know, we'll be working, you know, within the city and with partners to identify, you know, those areas so that we can gauge the success of this project, because one of the main goals is to see the take rate, the level of adoption of this platform be the same in low income areas as in not. You know, and that gets again to the equity goals of the overall project.
Next question. Thank you. Economic development bonds, will they be issued?
This isn't subject to economic development bonds. There's something very similar that's going to be, and this is part of the Economic Development Commission and the City Council's role, is that as part of this, there is a project agreement, so that there's a project agreement set up to reinvest some funds, and that's what you're pledging here. By the creation of the Tif District, what we would do is come back to you for the pledge of these TIF funds to this project. It's an agreement, though. It's not an issuance of a bond, so it's an agreement that is only payable by no other tax source, no other special tax, no general obligation of the city, only the tax or the TIF revenue from this specific TIF.
Okay. And then the only other question would be for Meridian is, what percentage do you calculate on a local workforce basis or minority other basis as we look at employment and you're bringing in a $50 million project locally? Do you anticipate utilizing some local laborers?
Yeah, I mean, when you take a look at building the network, there would be a significant amount of local employment through our construction partners. And then when you take a look at the ongoing construction of what we call the drops from the public right-of-way into each of the residential or business locations, that work is all done by local contractors. And then we will also be establishing an office that will have between, say, 8 and 12 local employees to manage our central Indiana network. And the idea is that will be placed into Bloomington.
That works. Thank you.
Any other questions from commissioners? Any comments from the public? And again, we'll keep those comments to 3 minutes, please.
Thank you.
Go ahead.
Just to introduce myself, my name's Matt Kelly. I'm with Comcast, and I just want to make sure that we're on the record with what our current capabilities are in the community and what services we offer. So quickly, we do cover approximately 98% or more of the city of Bloomington with our network. It is a gig speed network. We offer 1.2 gigabits download speeds, and we also are a participant in and I've got a brochure here that I'm handing out. We are a participant in the Affordable Connectivity Program as well. And so we offer $0 cost today, and this program, it's called Internet Essentials is what we call it, and we've been selling this service for less than $10 a month since 2011. And now through the ACP program, we offer for free. And we've connected over 2,000 families here in Bloomington, the city of Bloomington, with this program over these years. So impacting quite a few lives. We've always communicated and worked with Mr. Dietz and the mayor's office over the years, but we would be happy to answer any questions, anything that you would like to know more about Comcast Xfinity in the Bloomington area.
I'll also just note, so since the flyer was distributed to the Redevelopment Commission, Christina will make sure that these are included with the minutes as well, just to talk.
Thank you. Are there any questions from commissioners regarding that statement? All right. Any other public comments? Please.
Hi, Tom Havens with the Indiana Cable Broadband Association. Just very briefly, when we saw this come down the pike, it's concerning for a lot of reasons. One, as Matt indicated, we have a very large footprint in the city of Bloomington, 99% service. all gig plus speed, upload, download speed. So when I'm reading this PowerPoint, this is the first time I've seen it, so I'm sort of being for the first time here, we're fulfilling a lot of the objectives that the city wants to achieve. So we've been scratching our heads. It's almost like the city down here, you have an intersection with 3 gas stations on it, the city subsidizing 4th gas station just to get gas prices lower when the other gas stations are willing to drop the price if like the ACP program. So we've really just been scratching our heads if we have the technology, and we agree the need's there. We agree that the citizens need access, and they do. They have access. So the question becomes, why are we doing this? And honestly, I'm sitting here right now, and I'm still trying to. I've read through this entire PowerPoint. Still don't know. We still don't know. So I again want to put that on the record.
Could I have you talk fast?
Sorry, I know.
Could you just repeat your name and whom you represent?
Yes, Tom Havens, Indiana Cable and Broadband Association. So I represent all the incumbent cable providers. So the biggest footprint we have in the city of Bloomington is Comcast.
Thanks.
You're welcome.
And can I just ask a quick question? Did I understand both of you gentlemen to say that you feel like currently the city is covered 98% of its residents have access to high-speed internet?
From
and a gig, you said?
Yes, 1.2 gigabit download speeds today. And it is over our existing hybrid fiber coaxial network, so it's not all fiber. There's quite a bit of fiber in it, but we are in the process of enhancing that network over the next few years. We're going to be able to provide multi-gigabit symmetrical speeds over this exact same network. We're just going to make some improvements to it. Technology is advancing all the time. And so that is a few years down the road.
And I would also add that too, is that speeds are either or of value, right? Because I can have a gig at my house. Right now I have AT&T and I have Comcast service. So I have a hybrid coax fiber product, and I also have a fiber to the home product. My wife's a teacher. I have 5 kids, all 5 school-age kids. We went through the entire pandemic with, we varied our connection, which we were using, but never had a hiccup whatsoever with our internet service. So the question becomes, it's laudable to get a 250 meg, and we're providing that, but why more is needed is even, just in general across the state of the United States, why that's, your average person doesn't necessarily need that connection. So the service we're providing is more than adequate for business needs, for residential needs, things like that.
Thank you. Any other public comment? Is there anybody online? I can't necessarily see that.
If I might my name's Buzz Crum with O.W. Crum Associates, and I just wanted to clarify what Larry touched on, I think, in an earlier answer he gave, but this TIF arrangement would not be, the city's not issuing bonds and borrowing money to affect this deal. It's just they would be pledging a percentage of the property taxes from the Spider TIF back to Meridian. And if the TIF revenues don't meet the projected payback schedule, they still just are limited to getting back what that pledge of the percentage split of the TIF revenues. So it's not going to put any risk on the city for any TIF bond payments that wouldn't be fundable from the TIF coming directly from the Meridian project. I just wanted to make sure that was clear for the commissioners.
Thank you. Any other public comment? All right, not hearing any. I guess the question is to the commissioners as to if we would like to, I think Larry had instructed us earlier, revive the motion.
I actually had some further questions based on the public comment. I'm just interested in posing the question. I'll point it to Mr. Dietz, which is just the question raised: why does the city see this Spider TIF and need for fiber compared to what has been described, at least in terms of what Comcast can provide? So that's one part of the question. The other part is what the outcomes or the findings were of the digital equity plan in terms of where there's a need for digital equity, let's say, that is not being currently fulfilled by available resources? So that's the two-part question.
Sure. With regard to Comcast, as I had mentioned, earlier, they are our incumbent cable provider, so they have a footprint throughout the city. I would say that they are currently marketing that they provide, up to a gigabit, but in their language, it's almost always up to. Which, at least in the experience of myself and a lot of other people I know, weren't up to the the bandwidth promises that we had hoped for, certainly during the pandemic. That's not to say they don't have a valuable product, or they haven't contributed in many ways to to the community, but what we're talking about is something different, and that's a gigabit everywhere, period. It's service, a digital equity plan that isn't a low bandwidth product. It is what would be considered a relatively high bandwidth product, well above the federal government's definition of broadband. It's a commitment to operate this network as open access, so that once it is built, any number of potential ISPs could utilize that and benefit from that investment, and our community benefit from that as well. It's a commitment to network neutrality and a number of other elements that aren't present in the offering of the incumbent providers. And then more to, I think one other element, there's this, again, notion that, well, there's 4 gas stations at the intersection, or 3 gas stations at the intersection. I get that. But if there's a new gas station that's coming in and the city wants to see, electrification of vehicles, it might support a station that offers, charging. And I think that's, to me, that deals with, addresses that, analogy. We're looking for something that goes beyond the status quo here.
Thank you.
One last question. In order for this process to continue, we're the starting point, but there's still 5 additional stops along the finish line. Is that a correct statement when we're dealing with meetings that still have to have approval from different boards, bodies, and things, and then it will revert back to the redevelopment?
So this is basically on 2 parallel tracks, just to be really clear. So this part is the declaratory resolution to establish the Tif District. The next stop for this, as part of this packet, you'll see there's an economic development plan, which kind of covers what the TIF does, how to address it, and all that with a map as well. The next stop for this will be the Plan Commission, the Bloomington Plan Commission. The Plan Commission will look at that plan and look at the proposed TIF district to see if it complies with the comprehensive plan that the city has, a comprehensive development plan. This is because TIF districts typically, we're talking about real estate, we're talking about redevelopment of physical property. This is going to be a little bit different since we're talking about business personal property, right? But it's still through that statutory process goes to the Plan Commission. If the Plan Commission approves it, doesn't have any recommended changes, which would have to come back to you all, then it goes to the City Council. And the City Council would, they look at the Plan Commission order, they look at the Economic Development Plan, they look at the declaratory resolution, and if the City Council passes that, it comes back to you for a confirmatory resolution and also a public hearing. So that would take place July 5th is what we have proposed. So there would be a public hearing where you would receive public comment, similar to today, but it'd just be, we would list it formally as a public hearing. You would receive that comment, and then you could pass the confirmatory resolution, which would establish the TIF district. Parallel to that track is the notion of creating the obligation for the TIF funds. And so part of that is creating this contingent expenditure agreement as part of this project. That will start with the Economic Development Commission, and then it goes to City Council after that, and then there will be again, it'll probably happen that July 5th. We try to keep this as organized as possible for you all. Then it comes back to you all for a declaratory resolution to pledge the TIF funds itself, kind of pursuant to that agreement. So those are the two parallel tracks, kind of an expenditure agreement, similar to economic development bonds, but not a bond, as we mentioned. And just to be clear, there's no, as Mr. Crone mentioned, there's no cap, there's no particular projected amount that we're covering. The pledge is 95% of whatever that TIF generates, whatever the business personal property TIF generates is going back into the project. So if it's nothing, if nothing happens, then nothing is owed and nothing goes to the company, you know, and then going for there, it's just a percentage and it's capped at 20 years for the life of the project. So that's that. But those are the two parallel tracks for the final approval, which comes back to you all on that like July 5th kind of. You know, presuming that every other body approves it, that it goes through. But yes, there are several public engagements, public boards, and public hearings.
Okay. Well, last question, being cognizant of staff, your time, and what it takes, do you guys feel as though you have the adequate time in order to address this and the details that need to be between now and July 4th?
I can speak for myself. I mean, so these agreements are in place, and so we have the drafts of the agreement, not in place, but we have the drafts of the agreements ready to go before the boards. Also, I say, you know, Beth and Rick have, and I don't want to speak for you, so of course they speak for themselves. One of them is my boss. I don't really want to speak for him. They've been working on this for months in terms of the details and been very involved in this, and so that kind of brings up this third piece, which is a master development agreement that they've been working on with William, which kind of guides this entire deal. So almost all the details we're talking about kind of deals with that MDA. This is the part of the incentive that we do that is the but for this project that we're working on now. And we do have those documents in place. Those are ready to go. You will see it, the next action on this is actually a committee of the whole city council on Wednesday, where both a resolution and an ordinance would be taken up to look at, to start to look at what you all have done here, but also what we will come forward with from the Economic Development Commission.
Okay, I appreciate that. I just want to make sure staff, you know, you guys do a great job, have a lot to work on, and I would never want to put something in an overloaded situation, so time-wise. Okay.
All right, any other questions? Deborah?
It was just one quick clarifying question because Mr. Allen had noted that the actual, I guess we're calling it, it's not the rebate, but the return of the tax back to Meridian is based on obviously the property tax that's generated from the infrastructure built, so that can vary. My question is the $85,000 digital equity fund contribution that does not vary. Is that?
That is a pledge from Meridian. Sorry, I don't mean to.
Yeah, no, that's a pledge from Meridian, but given that their income may vary depending on the infrastructure built, I'm just clarifying the digital equity fund contribution.
My understanding is that is a set fee under the master development.
Okay, thank you.
That's correct.
I'll just chime in to say, yes, that's right. Larry's correct.
Who controls that fund?
That fund has not been established.
But who would control the fund?
You know, I suspect it might be set up as a non-reverting fund, but if I'm not sure if Jeff Underwood is on, he might be able to speak to that.
Typically, those funds are established by the administration, and unless there's statute that allows us to utilize that money directly, it would be appropriated by the city council.
Yeah. All right, any other questions from commissioners? Well, with that, I will ask if anyone would like to revive the motion that was made, what, a week ago?
Just has to be a new motion. Any
Okay.
can make it, so it doesn't have to be the original voice.
Well, since I made the original motion, I will, Deb Hutton, I move to approve RDC Resolution 2233. Period.
I will second that motion.
All right, we have a first and a second. All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Anyone opposed? Motion carries. All right, the next order of business is any general discussion. If not, I'll take a motion to adjourn. Go
I
ahead.
have a question for general discussion, which is just, I'm just trying to clarify how things went for the May 31st meeting, and I appreciate Mr. Allen kind of describing, because the question had been using Robert Rules of Order, and my question is just, when a question comes like that in terms of a point of order of how the commission's vote would be taken, is there an opportunity for you to have an outside counsel consultation in terms of just trying to sort out what is clearly just kind of many different threads between state law and city law and Robert's rules? And I'm just trying to better understand the procedure for evaluating those points of order.
Yeah, so there's not always a chance to consult with outside counsel in the moment in that terms of when there's a time. I have the various methods that I've utilized over my time in the city, just to be very clear, has been phone a friend, which is phone another attorney in the department really quickly to say, I want to get my bearings here. Here's what I'm thinking. Is this correct? In this case, in this specific instance, actually, we did have outside counsel here. So that was somebody I was able to discuss with. And just to be very clear, in this instance, what I did and where the mistake came in was whenever there's a point of order like this comes up, typically I will search on Westlaw and through our ordinances for something that's applicable, right? And in this case, what I searched just did not come up with the right statute, and that's my mistake. And so generally, the general rule under Bloomington Municipal Code is that when there's not a specific statute that deals with the point of order, then we default to Robert's Rules, which was the advice that I gave. Now, upon the questioning after the fact, saw the statute, looked it up. There's also an ordinance, as Mr. Askins had pointed out in a piece as well. And so looked at that and was like, I'm absolutely wrong. Like I was 100% wrong. And in that case, thankfully, the meeting was still going. And then, of course, we're going to come to you with whatever clarification. So as a general process, obviously we try to know those rules as best we can. And try to give you the solid advice. And if we need time, I'll typically try to ask for that time. I'm usually trying to search in real time, though, for those answers to keep the meeting going as smoothly as possible. But for that, since it was significant enough, to be honest with you, I should have taken more time with that and probably asked for a recess, and I apologize to the commission for that.
Okay, thank you. I just was, again, trying to understand the different balls in motion, so thank you.
And I will say, Larry, I greatly appreciate the fact you came back in, called the ball the way it was, and took things in the manner you did.
Of course.
Greatly appreciate it.
All right, is there any other general discussion? If not, I'll ask for a motion to adjourn.
I'll make a motion to adjourn.
Second.
All right, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Meeting's adjourned. Good night, everyone.